Nobody talks about this, but it's the real reason I stopped waiting for anyone to visit. I'm Evelyn. I'm 96 years old, and I spent more than 30 years learning what that first lonely night really takes from you. I remember that night more clearly than I remember some birthdays. It was just after 7 in the evening. The sun had gone down, and the house felt larger than it did during the day. I made a cup of tea, placed it beside my chair, and turned on the television. But I was not watching it. I was listening. Listening for a knock on the door. Listening for a car pulling into the driveway. Listening for the phone to ring. Every small sound made me look up, and every time it was nothing. That is the part people do not tell you about growing older. They talk about your knees, your gray hair, your eyesight. They tell you to eat well, stay active, and remember your doctor visits. But nobody prepares you for the evenings when the people you love become busy with lives of their own. Your children have families. Your grandchildren have school, work, friends, and plans. Old friends move away. Some become too tired to visit, and some are simply no longer here. Then one evening you look around and realize something has changed. You are waiting. That was me. For years I kept my evenings open because someone might visit. I kept extra food in the kitchen because someone might stop by. I avoided making plans because I did not want to miss a phone call. I thought waiting meant I still had hope, but slowly, waiting became my whole life. And that first lonely night took something from me that I did not understand at the time. It took away my sense that my time still belonged to me. That is what loneliness can do if you are not careful. It does not always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it enters quietly, like a small leak in a roof. At first you hardly notice it. But if you ignore it long enough, the damage grows. It took me years to understand that I could not control who visited me. But I could control what I did with the hours they were not there. So one evening I stopped watching the window. I stopped checking the clock. And I stopped telling myself, maybe someone will come tomorrow. That choice changed the way I lived. If you are over 70, 80, or even 90, and you have ever spent an evening hoping someone would remember to visit, stay with me. Because what I learned after I stopped waiting surprised even me, and I wish I had learned it much sooner. You've probably felt it too, that moment you realize you can't do this alone anymore, and nobody wants to say it out loud. Maybe it happened when carrying groceries into the house became harder than it used to be. Maybe you stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked up, knowing your legs did not trust those steps anymore. Maybe you dropped something on the floor and had to think twice before bending down to pick it up. These moments seem small. But when you are older, small moments can carry big questions. What happens if I need more help? Will my children get tired of helping me? Will they think I am becoming a burden? And perhaps the hardest question of all, will I have to leave my home? I know that fear. For years, I hated asking anyone for help. Even when someone offered, I would smile and say, I'm fine. Sometimes I was not fine at all. But asking for help made me feel like I was losing something. My freedom, my strength, my place in the family. When you have spent most of your life helping other people, needing help yourself can feel strange. You remember carrying your children when they were tired. You remember cooking meals, paying bills, solving problems, and being the person everyone called when something went wrong. Then one day, you are the one who needs someone. That change can hurt your pride. And because you do not want to become a burden, you may start hiding what you need. You stop telling your children when something is difficult. You say you already ate when you did not feel like cooking. You say the house is easy to manage when you know some rooms have not been cleaned properly in weeks. You tell everyone you are fine because fine feels safer than admitting you are struggling. But hiding your needs does not make those needs disappear. It is like seeing a small crack in a wall and covering it with a picture. You may not see the crack anymore, but it is still there. And this is where many older people become trapped. They are afraid that asking for a little help today will lead to losing everything tomorrow. The house, the keys, the freedom to decide when to sleep, what to eat, and how to spend the day. I understand why that fear feels so heavy. Your home is not just walls and furniture. It holds your memories. You may still remember children running through the hallway, holiday meals around the table, a husband or wife sitting in a favorite chair, birthdays, arguments, laughter, tears, and ordinary mornings that now feel precious. The thought of leaving all of that behind can feel like losing part of yourself. But I learned something important. Needing help does not mean your life is over, and accepting help does not mean giving away every bit of your freedom. Sometimes asking for the right kind of help is exactly what allows you to keep your independence longer. I wish I had understood that before fear made so many decisions for me. Before all of this, my life was simple, not perfect, but it was mine. I lived in the same house for more than 50 years. My husband and I moved there when we were still young enough to believe we had all the time in the world. The house was smaller then. Or maybe our dreams were just bigger. I can still remember the smell of my kitchen early in the morning. Coffee would be brewing while bread warmed in the oven. Some mornings my husband would walk in before I finished breakfast and ask, "Is it ready yet?" I would pretend to be annoyed, but I loved hearing him ask. There was a small window above the kitchen sink. I could see part of the backyard from there. In spring, birds would gather near the fence. In winter, the glass would sometimes turn cloudy from the warmth inside. Those little things became part of my life without me knowing how precious they were. I had a chair near the living room window. That was my chair. Everyone knew it. From there, I could watch people walking down the street. I could see children riding bicycles and neighbors returning home from work. Sometimes I would sit there with a book. Sometimes I would sew, and sometimes I would do absolutely nothing. That was the beauty of it. I did not need permission. If I wanted tea at midnight, I made tea. If I wanted to stay in bed until 9, I stayed there. If I wanted the curtains open, they stayed open. My life moved to my own clock. Even the sound of my front door meant something to me. I knew the little click the lock made when I turned the key. I knew exactly how hard I had to push because the door would stick when the weather became cold. That sound told me something simple. I was home. My husband and I had routines that seemed ordinary at the time. He liked the newspaper in the morning. I liked quiet. He wanted the television louder than I did. I would complain about it and he would laugh. After dinner, we often sat in the same room without saying much. When you have loved someone for many years, silence does not always need to be filled. Then he was gone, and suddenly every routine changed. His chair stayed empty. His cup disappeared from the kitchen table. The television became too quiet. At first, I thought the hardest part would be missing him. I was wrong. The hardest part was learning how to live inside a life we had built together when I was now the only person left to live it. So I held tighter to the house, the kitchen, my chair, my front door, my routines. They were no longer just things. They became proof that some part of my old life was still here. That is why people sometimes misunderstand older adults who refuse to leave their homes. They see an old building. We see our lives. Every room holds a chapter. Every mark on the wall has a story. Every familiar sound reminds us that we once had a house full of plans, voices, and ordinary days. And when someone suggests leaving, they may think they are asking us to change our address. But sometimes it feels like they are asking us to close the door on an entire lifetime. The day everything changed started like an ordinary Tuesday. I had made my coffee. I opened the curtains. I sat in my chair for a while, and watched the morning light come through the window. Then I went into the kitchen. There was a small rug near the sink. I had walked over that rug thousands of times, but that morning my foot caught the edge. I fell. It happened so quickly that I did not even have time to put out my hands properly. 1 second I was standing. The next I was on the floor. For a few moments I just stayed there. I remember staring at the bottom of the kitchen cabinet and thinking, "Get up, Evelyn." But my body did not move the way I wanted it to. That frightened me more than the fall itself. I eventually reached the phone and called for help. After that came the hospital, the tests, the questions, and the worried faces. I was lucky. Nothing was badly broken, but something had changed. My children had seen what I had been trying to hide. I was not as safe alone as I once was. A few days later, we had what they called a family meeting. I was sitting right there. But somehow I did not feel like I was truly part of it. They talked about stairs. They talked about meals. They talked about what might happen if I fell again. They talked about who lived too far away and who could not visit every day. I understood their fear. They loved me. But I also remember thinking, why does everyone sound like they are planning my life while I am still sitting here? Then someone said the words I had feared for years. "We think you need somewhere with more help." I knew what that meant. Soon boxes appeared. Packing your life is a strange thing. Someone holds up a dress and asks, "Do you need this?" How do you explain that you wore that dress on your 40th wedding anniversary? Someone picks up an old cup and says, "We can probably leave this," but they do not know your husband drank from that cup every Sunday morning. To them it is a cup. To you it is a memory you can hold. I could not take everything, so my whole life was slowly divided into piles. Take, leave, give away, throw out. With every box that closed, the house felt less like mine. Then came the final morning. I stood near my front door with my coat on and looked back. My chair was still by the window. The kitchen was quiet. The rooms looked almost normal. That somehow made leaving harder. I touched the door before I walked outside. I knew that little click of the lock better than almost any sound in the world. But this time it sounded different. When we arrived at my new room, everyone tried to make me comfortable. They unpacked my clothes. They placed photographs beside my bed. They told me I would make friends. I smiled because I knew they were trying. But inside, something finally became clear. That's when I understood. This wasn't a visit. This was a goodbye to the life I knew. People think a nursing home is where life ends. I used to think that too. Before I came here, the words nursing home sounded like defeat to me. I pictured long hallways, closed doors, quiet rooms, and people sitting around waiting for another day to pass. I thought coming here meant I had lost my home, lost my freedom, lost the right to decide how my own life should look. And during those first few weeks, that was exactly how it felt. People told me when meals were ready. Someone checked on me during the night. There were new faces everywhere. Even simple things, like finding the bathroom in the dark, felt strange. I missed knowing every sound around me. At home, if the floor made a noise, I knew which board had moved. Here, every sound belonged to someone else. But after a while, I began to notice something I had never expected. People think a nursing home is where life ends. But the truth is, it's where you find out who you really are without anyone needing you. That can be a painful thing to discover. For most of my life, I knew who I was because of what I did for other people. I was a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a cook, a helper, a person people called when they needed something. Then suddenly, nobody needed me to cook dinner. Nobody needed me to wash clothes. Nobody needed me to keep the house running. At first, I felt useless. If nobody needed me, then who was I? That question stayed with me. And I began to understand that growing older can test your identity in ways nobody prepares you for. We spend years building our lives around jobs, children, marriage, and duties. Those things are important, but they can become like labels on jars. After many years, we start believing the label is the whole thing. Then life removes the label, and we panic, but the jar is still there. You are still there. I was still Evelyn. I still liked music in the morning. I still enjoyed making people laugh. I still had stories worth telling. I still loved sitting near a window when the afternoon sun came through, and I could still choose how I treated the people around me. Little by little, I stopped seeing this place only as the place I had been sent. I started seeing it as the place where I had to meet myself again, not as someone's wife, not only as someone's mother, not as the woman who kept a certain house for more than 50 years, just me. That does not mean losing my home stopped hurting. It did not. There are still days when I would give almost anything to hear that old front door again. But leaving one life does not mean there is nothing left. Sometimes life takes away the roles you depended on and asks a frightening question: who are you now? I thought that question would destroy me. Instead, answering it slowly began to rebuild me. I sometimes think growing old is a little like being a plant moved into a new pot. Imagine a plant that has spent 40 or 50 years in the same soil. Its roots know every inch of that ground. It knows where the morning light comes from. It knows how much water it gets. It has survived hot summers, cold winters, storms, and dry days. Then one day someone digs it up. Even if they are careful, the roots are shaken. Some may break. The plant is placed in new soil, in a place it does not know. For a while it may look weak. That does not mean it is dead. It means it has been moved. That was how I felt when I came here. My roots had been pulled from the house where I had spent most of my adult life. Everything around me was different. Even my body seemed to understand that something had changed. I did not sleep well. I did not eat much. I did not want to talk. Then I met a woman named Ruth, who lived 3 doors down from me. Ruth was 91. The first time I saw her, she was sitting alone near a window with a small blue sweater folded across her lap. We started talking one afternoon. She told me the sweater had belonged to her daughter, who had died many years earlier. Ruth had also lived alone before coming here. She had loved her garden. She talked about her roses as if they were old friends. When her family moved her into the nursing home, she was angry. I didn't speak to my son for 2 weeks, she told me. I understood. But then Ruth said something I never forgot. She pointed toward a small plant sitting on her windowsill. When they brought me here, she said, that plant came with me. It had once been part of a much larger plant in her garden. A nurse had helped her place the cutting in a small pot. At first, it lost several leaves. Ruth thought it would die, but it did not. New leaves began to grow. Not in the old garden, not in the old soil, right there on that windowsill. Ruth smiled and said, I suppose we are both learning. That stayed with me, because starting again does not mean pretending the old life did not matter. The plant does not forget where it came from. Neither do we. Our memories come with us. Our love comes with us. The lessons we learned come with us. And even the pain comes with us. But roots can grow again, slowly, quietly. One conversation can become a friendship. One familiar nurse can become someone you trust. One chair near a new window can slowly begin to feel like your chair. That does not replace what you lost. Nothing should have to. But loss and new life can exist together. I learned that from Ruth, and I learned it from that little plant on her windowsill. Being moved can shake you deeply, but being shaken is not the same as being finished. Sometimes, even at 90, new roots are still possible. Something changed in me after that. It did not happen in one day. There was no morning when I woke up and suddenly stopped missing my house. There was no magic moment when every painful feeling disappeared. Healing rarely works that way. It came slowly, one ordinary day at a time. I stopped grieving the house and started noticing the people who sat with me anyway. I noticed the nurse who always remembered how I liked my tea. I noticed Ruth waiting for me near the window after lunch. I noticed the young worker who sometimes stayed an extra 5 minutes just to hear one of my old stories. I noticed the woman across the hall who smiled every morning, even though she could not always remember my name. These things seemed small, but small things can become very important when life has taken something big from you. For so long I had been looking backward. I was thinking about my kitchen, my chair, my husband, my front door. I kept comparing everything here to everything I had lost. And when you compare every new day to your best old days, the present will almost always feel empty. So I began doing something different. I started asking myself, what is still here? I still had people who cared whether I ate breakfast. I still had someone to talk to. I still had music. I still had sunlight coming through a window. I still had memories that belonged to me. Most of all, I still had myself. That may sound simple, but it took me a long time to understand it. A house can hold your memories, but it does not own them. A chair can be special, but it does not create your worth. An address can tell someone where you live, but it cannot tell them who you are. I had spent years believing my independence was tied to my house. Then I learned that real independence can also mean keeping your voice, making choices when you can, saying what you need, choosing kindness, choosing friendship, choosing to remain interested in tomorrow. I am 96 now. I have lost people I thought I could never live without. I have left rooms I thought I would grow old inside. I have watched parts of my old life disappear, but I am still here, and there is dignity in that. These days, I do not sit near the window waiting for someone to come and rescue me from loneliness. Sometimes I sit there with Ruth. Sometimes I sit alone. Both can be peaceful now, because being alone and being forgotten are not the same thing. And living somewhere new does not erase the person you were before you arrived. I am not a room number. I am not a nursing home resident before I am a person. I am not defined by the address where I sleep. I am Evelyn. I have loved, I have lost, I have helped people. I have needed help, and I have learned that life can become smaller without becoming meaningless. My world changed, but my worth did not. When I look back now, I understand why that first night was so hard. It was not because the room was unfamiliar. It was not because the bed felt different. It was not because I could hear footsteps in the hallway, or because I did not know the people around me. The first night was the hardest because of what I thought it meant about my life. I thought coming here meant I had failed. I thought needing help meant I was no longer strong. I thought leaving my house meant leaving the best parts of myself behind. And when I looked at those boxes beside my new bed, I thought I was looking at everything that remained of my old life, but I was wrong. My life was never inside those boxes. It was inside me. The house where I spent more than 50 years mattered deeply. My husband mattered. Our mornings together mattered. My kitchen, my chair by the window, and that old front door all mattered. I will never pretend they did not. But losing a place does not mean losing yourself. Needing help does not erase all the years you spent helping others. Growing older does not remove your value. And moving into a nursing home does not turn you into someone whose life is finished. It didn't mean my story was over. It meant a new chapter started on different terms. I had to learn new routines. I had to accept help. I had to make peace with things I could no longer control. But I also found new people, new conversations, new reasons to smile. And even at 96, I discovered there were still things about myself I had not yet learned. So if you are facing this decision today, please remember something. Fear does not always mean you are making the wrong choice. Sometimes fear simply means you are standing at a door you never expected to walk through. And if you are making this choice for your mother, your father, your husband, or your wife, remember that they may be grieving more than a house. They may feel like they are losing the person they used to be. Give them time. Listen to them. Let them keep the small things that still make life feel like their own, and remind them that needing care does not make them less worthy of respect. Maybe you have already had to make this decision. Maybe it was for a parent. Maybe it was for someone you loved. Or maybe you are facing it for yourself right now. If you feel comfortable, tell me about your experience in the comments. Your story may be exactly what another person needs to hear tonight. And if this story moved you, you can subscribe and stay with me. There are still many things about growing older that people are afraid to talk about. Maybe it is time we talked about them together. Because wherever you sleep tonight, remember this: your address may change, your life may change, but your worth does not.